Hey, welcome to Just Salvos Live. Today we're looking at an incredibly important issue, and it's one that was requested to us via our Facebook page from one of our viewers. We're looking at the sexualization of children. What is it, and how does it affect our children and our society today? We're able to get an interview with an amazing guest. She's an absolute expert in this field and lovely to talk to. Her name is Collette Smart. Collette, thank you so much for joining us.
That's a pleasure.
Do you want to start by telling us a little bit about yourself, Collette?
Yeah. Okay, sure. Well, pretty much I'm a child adolescent psychotherapist, and I'm a consultant and part of the core team of Collective Shout. And I spend time with running seminars for parents and school counsellors, mental health workers around the country, as well as spending time doing one-on-one counselling with children and adolescents. And so I have become more and more involved with Collective Shout and part of the core team because of my passion for just everything that's going on in terms of media and the internet and how it's affecting our children today.
So can you tell us, just give us a run through, what is the issue? What are we talking about here?
Okay, so, well, what I'll do is I'll just give you basically an idea of what we feel at Collective Shout is a massive issue in terms of society and children now today, that what our children are facing that they haven't really ever had to face in such large proportions on such a big scale before. And we talk about sexualization and basically combating our children being sexualized or objectified at every turn. And so what I mean by sexualization is a sexualized image is basically even defined by the Australian Psychological Society. And they say that sexualization happens when a person's worth is judged on their sex appeal and their behaviour becomes everything about sex appeal to the exclusion of all other characteristics or most other characteristics. So a person is held to a standard that equates physical attractiveness and that becomes being sexy or being hot, like a lot of the teen role models which are inappropriate, like Britney Spears and so on. And so the child or adolescent starts to see themselves as a sexual object rather than a person with their own independent thoughts or their own independent behaviours. And so that's what we mean by sexualized images or sexualized behaviour in terms of children and adolescents. And it really becomes an issue with self-esteem of children because they're starting to see that as the most important part of who they are or who they should be. And the message is really damaging for children.
That's a really great summary. Thank you so much. Can you give us some examples in society? What is a sexualized image in society? Where are children seeing these images?
I think one of the most recent ones that I'll bring up immediately is, unfortunately, in the latest children's movie over the Easter holidays was Hop. And in the Hop movie, Hop is a teenage bunny who chooses not to be involved in his father's business, who is the Easter Bunny. But one of his first visits as he goes out to discover himself is actually to the Playboy Mansion. And I know a lot of parents were absolutely shocked when they sat in the movie theatre, and one of the places that this bunny goes to is the Playboy Mansion, and he's told that he needs to be sexy. And I think that is absolutely inappropriate for young children. So it's things like movies, even as far as young children's movies these days, like that example. Video games, for example, like the Wii game, which was We Dare, which Collective Shout has really created an issue. We have an issue with the game because it's there's a lot of adult themes, adult types of behaviours of spanking and kissing and so on. It only got a PG rating. Then your general billboards, the Calvin Klein billboard, which we complained about, and a lot of people, our Collective Shout members complained, and we got that upheld by the Ad Standard Board. But it's your everyday billboards, it's your T-shirt in mainstream stores with sexualized images and violent images of violence against women. Slogans, even on babies' rompers, sold in some of the stores. Music videos, which are your obvious ones on Saturday morning. So anything that has to do with showing children or sending a message to children that being sexy or wearing very little, particularly for girls, um, is actually what makes them become grown up. I think we see that message very clearly in a lot of the teenage role models, such as Miley Cyrus, where they tend to portray that the only way that you can show that you've become a teenager or a young adult is to take your clothes off and show as much flesh as possible. And so that's the image that our girls are getting. Or something else that Collective Shout is in the media a lot for, even this week, is the child beauty pageants that are coming from the US. And we're finding it quite problematic because it's very much about false nails and hair extensions and false teeth for these tiny little 3 and 4-year-old girls who are having fake tans and eyebrow waxing and all sorts of things that little girls should never be having to do other than play at that age. And so these kind of issues that Collective Shout feel we just want to protect childhood and protect little girls from being combated with all these images, and then also boys from being fed the message that as they get older, girls are just really worth their bodies, not worth anything or any skill.
That's an interesting point in terms of the difference between boys and girls. We hear lots of terms: sexualization of children, sexualization of childhood, sexualization of girls. Is there a difference with any of those terms? But particularly, does it affect boys and girls differently?
Yes, I would say it does. There's Dr. Linda Papadopoulos, who was instrumental in doing some work for the American Psychological Association and looking into sexualization. She found that it affects girls and boys just as much, but very differently in terms of how they feel about themselves and how they view the opposite sex. So I'd say sexualization is more around women and how girls see how they should behave and how they should show who they are to boys and to other girls. I'd say for boys particularly, it's more a case of how they begin to view women or begin to view the opposite sex. So girls, for example, will have issues as they grow up in terms of self-image, and they develop things like eating disorders and so on. Boys don't develop self-image issues in the same way that girls do. Boys would more look at girls and think, well, that kind of image that I've seen on the billboard, that's the kind of image I should be looking for in a girl or in a woman.
Although Collette,
then when they don't see, sorry?
Oh, I was just saying, you said something interesting there, that boys don't develop some of these issues, and I'm wondering if you could play that out a little bit, because from what we understand, these issues are affecting boys now. You know, we've got your Zac Efrons and your Justin Biebers, and we've got these almost impossible role models with their perfect bodies and their Photoshop faces now for boys to admire and aspire to. And I'm wondering, are boys starting to be affected by this more and more?
Yes, and so what I would say is it would be different. Girls are about being hot, sexy, and thin. So the thin ideal being really skinny, being the blonde, beautiful bombshell that's portrayed in the media, in pornography, and so on. With boys, it's more, we are getting boys' self-image and body image issues, but for boys, it's how muscular you are. Do you have your six-pack? Do you have the chiseled jaw and so on? And then feeling the boys developing self-image issues, not because they don't feel that they're skinny enough, but they're not muscular enough. Yep. And it's the blonde, beautiful bombshell on the billboard or in the music videos. If they don't get the attention of those so-called stereotypical girls, they begin to feel inadequate because they feel like they don't measure up, they're not man enough. They start to think that girls expect certain sexual acts because that's what the media shows them women want. And so they get this skewed view of what relationships really look like and what girls actually want in a guy. They just think that girls expect them to be, really overtly sexually active and have these perfectly chiseled bodies, which is unrealistic. And then the girls develop self-image issues because they also feel they don't measure up to the billboard image, and then we end up with the eating disorders and so on because they feel inadequate and they don't believe boys would want them. And very often when I talk to students, when I do seminars for young people and students, I tell them that what they're looking at in the magazine and on the billboard is actually a lie. There is no such person. It's actually digitally enhanced. It's totally fake. So the person that they're trying to aspire to in the magazine image is actually not even a real person that anyone would really be able to attain. And
Collette.
so it's very much a blurred or skewed view of what reality is.
Collette, it's almost depressing, and I'm sure every parent out there and many young people can really relate to all of these issues. So the question, as we said at the start of the show, actually came from a few viewers at home, and they really want to know, how do they protect their children from this stuff? It is everywhere. It's on billboards, it's on T-shirts, it's in our dolls, in our toy stores. How does a parent of young children protect them from this overt sexualization?
Well, what I'd say is when I usually talk to parents about this kind of issue is you cannot make a blanket statement for all age groups. I would say that different age groups need different information and different levels of information with their parents. So, for example, talking to a 5-year-old would be very different to talking to a 15, 16-year-old. So I'd say, firstly, let me just say that children, even teenagers, I find, they still find their parents to be one of the most trustworthy sources of information. And I think sometimes as parents, some of our baggage from years gone by when our parents wouldn't talk to us openly about sexual matters, sometimes we carry that baggage over to our children and we feel uncomfortable. But for our children, especially little children, talking about sex or sexual images is as much as talking, it's easier talking about the weather to them, really, because they don't have preconceived ideas. So when you're talking to your little children, you can actually talk very matter-of-factly with them, try and get over some of your discomfort because they will only pick that up from you. And once you get over that, it will just become quite an easy thing to talk about. I would say particularly it's important for parents to know in general what children are watching on TV. Make rules about the programs and things that your children watch, the videos that they watch, so that you know that they're age appropriate. Unfortunately, like I spoke about the Hop movie, I mean, that had a general rating, and even that had something inappropriate in it. So it's a matter of very often watching what your children watch, being aware of what they watch, and then opening it up to conversation. Looking for appropriate games that your children can play, use filters and screening programs for the internet or computers, checking their video games before they play them. And so I'd say particularly for little children, I think you just give, let's say, for example, preschoolers. Little children can't express themselves or express complex emotions very easily or directly. So the best thing is for parents to often look for clues to what their children might be feeling through their play. Little children often play or draw spontaneously what they're feeling. And then the main thing little children need is reassurance more than facts. So if they bring something up, just really talk through them with how they loved and that they're safe and things like that. Your primary school children, I would say, they are starting to become much more aware because they'll get into the playground where older brothers and sisters or siblings of their brothers and sisters, friends of their older siblings, other older students in the playground, they will start to say things and the little children will pick them up. Things to say to your children at that age would be, I can see you look a little bit worried about that program or that you saw, heard. Talk through that with them. You can use things like games or art just to get them chatting. I would say also with your primary age children is to, if you've driven past the billboard, for example, talk fairly soon afterwards to them about it because they are aware of it, and if their parents aren't talking to them about it, then they may go to places like the internet or older teenagers where they won't get the correct facts or the correct information. So actually say to them, oh, I noticed that you looked at that billboard as we walked past it or we drove past it, and what did you think about that? And just give them, you don't have to go with primary school children into great detail about rapes and things like that. That would just make them fearful. But just talk to them about loving relationships and people loving each other, and generally about, their toys, particularly like the Bratz dolls. I talk to I've got a younger daughter, and which is one of my 3 children, and I talk to her quite openly about Bratz dolls. Even since she was 5, I used to talk to her and just say, I really don't like the way the Bratz dolls, their clothing is very small. We talk about the head being actually too big for the body, which is very much like an anorexic type of form, that it's not a healthy type of look, and things, just generally things like that, without making her too afraid. Then I'd say for adolescents and pre-adolescents, even from 10 years old, I'd say adolescents can begin to become overwhelmed with some of the things that they see. And if they, again, are not talking to trusted adults, they can actually feel disempowered or discouraged, and their self-esteem gets affected. So I think with adolescents, you just engage in direct questioning with them. If you are struggling with your relationship currently with your adolescent or your teenager in terms of being able to chat openly, that will pass, but it's important to have a role model in your adolescent's life, whether it's an aunt, an uncle, a youth leader, a grandparent, somebody that they can just chat to about just the images that they're seeing, and then ask them questions. How does that make you feel, that image? What does it make you feel about yourself? And then even parents who struggle to talk directly with their teenager, the best thing very often with those teens is actually to talk about their friends and say to them things like, so I wonder what your friends might be thinking about that kind of DVD, that Britney Spears or whatever the latest DVD is, Lady Gaga. What do you think your friends would think about her? And say she was one of your friends. What would you say if she went out wearing something like that? And what do you think boys think about her when she dresses like that? Or if it's a boy, say to him, what kind of message would a girl give you if she dressed in that kind of outfit? And, how do you think you should respond? What are appropriate ways of responding to a girl when she's dressed like that? Also to get through with boys that whole message that girls just want sex all the time. And, it's free for all and rape is okay. There's one of the T-shirts that we completely abhor at Collette to Shout is the one that says it's not rape if you yell surprise. So it's things like that that are just atrocious, that we need to talk through our boys the actual messages behind that and what they think about those kind of things. So I'd say that's just a very basic general idea of what you can do with each age group.
You could also, there's some great stuff on YouTube of Lady Gaga constantly falling over on her heels, and I think a great example, which we don't see often, that this stuff isn't natural. Like it's not normal for you to do this, and so anyway. Yeah. Man, it's such a deep issue, and we could go on for a long time. Collette, thank you so much. You've opened our eyes today to the scope of this issue and just how broad it is. You've certainly informed us on a grand scale about how we can help and primarily it's around talking to our children. So thank you so much for your time. We really appreciate it. We've got all the details on our Facebook page for Collective Shout. You can also have a look right now on the screen, obviously. We've got the Collective Shout web address. Please stick around, jump on the Facebook and talk about all of these issues and more. We will see you next week on Just Salvos Live.